Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Friday morning. We are in the aftermath of the two initial Democratic debates, although I think the first debate has already been largely forgotten. And we are we're picking through the debris of the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden exchange. And I'm sure, Mr. Matt Lewis, you have some thoughts on that.
Man, I have so many thoughts. I think I could almost write a book about it at this point. This is very pregnant with commentary. I think it was to state the obvious. I think it was a big deal. I think that Kamala Harris clearly won the debate, and I think it exposed Joe Biden's potential vulnerabilities. That he's playing this prevent defense, trying to run out the clock. And he was susceptible to what happened. I think Kamala, it's a brilliant, kind of almost a stroke of genius. I think it simultaneously increases the odds that she will be the nominee and that she would be the running mate if Biden were to be the nominee. So,
well, I don't know as much about that last point.
No, look, here's why, Bill. Here's why. Number one, she pushed him hard, but not too hard as to disqualify herself. And secondly, she exposed his vulnerability to issues, sensitivities about race and his past. How do you fix those problems? How do you heal the party? How do you unite the party? How do you bring African Americans, which I think are pretty clearly the most important constituency in the Democratic Party, to turn out? Maybe we could argue about that, but I think that's probably true. How do you bring everybody together and unite the party? You make Kamala the running mate.
Well, I don't think that's wrong, and I would not argue that she has disqualified herself as VP. All your points are dead on. I mean, plenty of people who have had scraps in a primary have come together in a manner of healing for the general. But I think already Kamala was the running away choice for a Biden running mate if he was to be the nominee. And she could have played a prevent defense. She could have laid low and laid off of Biden to have it happen. Biden was already the front runner. If he went wire to wire, she's the obvious choice to balance him out age-wise, demographically, etc. Biden wins, likely a one-term proposition, and then Kamala runs in 2024. Like, everybody's happy. She made a decision to not run for number two, and she has taken a risk. I mean, she couldn't know it was going to turn out as well as it did.
No, but here's the point I would make. The riskiest thing is to play it safe. Biden did the riskiest thing, which is to play it safe. This prevent defense, run out the clock. The safest thing is to be aggressive. So, yes, Kamala, I think, deserves a lot of credit for moxie and doing what she did. And as it turns out, I think that not, again, I think it was for her, it was a win-win. Great night. And the question is, we talked about this before, does Joe Biden show attrition? I mean, I'm very interested to see the polling on this. I think that she drew blood. I think that it will hurt him, and that causes a feeding frenzy, and he gets picked apart. But if maybe he is, it's possible he's immune to all of this, and if that's the case, then people have made up their minds, and he's bulletproof. I just don't buy that. I mean, think of it in terms of, look, the Democratic Party. They may be pragmatic, but at the end of the day, people want excitement. They don't want to fall in line. They want to fall in love. They want someone who can take it to Donald Trump on the debate stage. She showed last night that she is probably the best equipped person to do that. And think about South Carolina, all those pragmatic African-American voters who are with Biden for now. What happens if she starts really doing well in debates? I think Biden's in trouble.
Oh, I don't disagree with any of that. And, I mean, the challenge for all the candidates is to show in some way that you could take the fight to Trump. And Biden was doing that by buoyed by lots of polls showing him beating Trump handily. But Biden wasn't doing anything extra special. He wasn't doing anything unique on the stump to say, here's what I'm going to do for Trump. He would just sort of be who he was, and Trump seemed to be acting kind of erratically in response to him, and then you felt comfortable he could go head-to-head. And everyone else sort of gets asked what you're going to do about Trump, and they give some kind of, pre-cooked answer that doesn't really show what you would do. And
she showed it.
And what's hard is if you can't get into a fight with Trump, and Biden was getting into fights with Trump and seeming like he was coming out ahead, so that was reassuring. To get into a fight with a Democrat is very risky because there's a high chance that it will blow back on you for sowing discord within the party. And after Biden went around with Booker on this issue of his role with the segregationists, Biden seemed to survive that. I mean, and Biden was fairly petulant, saying I should apologize, Court should apologize to me, and that didn't seem to hurt him. I mean, we have a little bit of polling data, but it didn't show anything negative.
I think there's a few things at play here. One, I don't know if Kamala is just that good or just that lucky, but she had, remember early on she had the line of the night when she talked about the food fight. Mm-hmm. She had that laugh line that she delivered almost flawlessly. Mm-hmm. It got a big laugh, and she kind of looked like she was the adult scolding the kids and Gramps for. So she just it wasn't just a good strategy. It was a really good delivery. I think the other problem that Biden has, it reminds me of something that happened to Rubio in those Republican primary debates. Rubio would say something that I thought was really smart or great, and it would fall flat in the room because the kinds of people who go to a Republican primary debate wanted what Trump was offering. They didn't want what Rubio was offering. Now, that may not have been indicative at the time of the broader electorate. It may or may not have been indicative of the broader electorate, but in the room, it starts to play with your confidence. If you say something and it falls flat, and I felt like it happened to Klobuchar, and I think it happened to Biden, even before Kamala got to knife him, his remarks were kind of falling flat. I think it was because the people in the room are not into being a moderate or being pragmatic.
Well, I don't think that's quite right. I mean, I actually would even more disagree. There were a number of Democrats last night who were not falling in line on single payer, who were pretty brazenly criticizing single payer as too much, pushing public option instead, and the crowd was not turning on them. Even John Delaney, the night before, made some pretty pointed comments about single payer and got applause for that. I mean, it wasn't like the room exploded, but the fact they got any applause at all, was striking to me. Biden certainly had the worst night of them all, no question. Not a great night for Bernie either, quite frankly. He took a fair amount of hits, and it seemed like he was relatively by himself defending the fully maximalist Democratic Socialist program. So I think both debates showed the diversity of viewpoint in the party. I don't think Biden's weakness here, I don't believe, is rooted in the moderate pragmatism he was espousing. Even in Kamala's remarks, she made a point of saying, I agree with you on finding common ground. She found the soft spot, which was the busing stance, and she was in a unique position to prosecute that because she was a product of busing. And that's
the other thing too is Biden just may not, the sense that he looked old and that he looked slow and that he wasn't up to it. If you look at those debates he did, now granted it was a few years ago, but the way he handled Paul Ryan and Sarah Palin, he was incredibly sharp and quick, but I think maybe it's just a different skill set. I mean, to be seated and facing a one-on-one Republican opponent is very different than to be standing facing 9 Democratic opponents that are going to pick you apart. It's a very different setting. And so maybe Biden has gotten too old, or maybe it's just not indicative of how he would perform in a one-on-one debate against Trump.
Well, I think it's just a cattle call question, because Biden had good cattle call debates, too, in 2008. I mean, I've mentioned this on past shows. The Giuliani line, everything he says is now a verb 9/11, that was a cattle call. When he had a great moment in the CNN YouTube debate when a guy who was a gun nut was given a YouTube question like, "Are you going to protect my babies?" He holds up his assault rifles, and Biden says, you need help, which, was, harsh. It may have been the right thing to say in general, but, the crowd there loved it. But he wasn't the guy in the middle of the cattle call. He wasn't.
It seems like he has something. He's playing like he has something to lose.
Well, he does.
Instead of, but in the vice presidential debates, he was like the attack dog.
He had much more ability to, as Kamala did, bulldoze the stage, grab the mic, ignore the debate rules, and own the space. And you can't do that as easily. When you're the front runner and you're a front runner who has vulnerabilities, and to explain those vulnerabilities often takes more than 30 to 90 seconds. So how do you defend your busing position from 1978 in a 90-second spot? That's much, much harder. So
it's tough. And then when he says, like, my time is up, the double entendre there.
Yeah, obviously that was, not. Kamala, I assume, was, I think it was his 95% preparation. These were not things she made up on the fly. That the whole speech directed at Biden was clearly a planned speech, but delivered fluidly, not like she was reading off a script. And she had the wherewithal to seize the moment. Biden's prevent defense, up until that point, I would say was largely working. He wasn't lighting up the room, but he was on the verge of escaping without causing any kind of major disruption to the status quo, because nobody else was going at him hard. People seemed hesitant.
So this was right after the break. So this is like 1 hour in.
Yeah,
it's the start of the third quarter of the debate.
And it wasn't. And Kamala wasn't even called on, mind you. She insisted that she have a turn at the mic, and the moderators were pushing back on her, and she grabbed it because she wanted that moment.
Did you see that Andrew Yang, my guy, my guy is claiming that his mic was turned off, that he couldn't jump in or interrupt at any point, that literally his mic was off.
Who knows? These conspiracies generally don't fly. I've never seen a network news operation manipulate the mics to favor one candidate over another. So if he's going to make an accusation like that, he better have the goods, which I doubt he has.
How do you prove that, though?
I don't know. Obviously glitches happen, but I cannot believe that that was a deliberate decision on the part of the network. And look, there are sports events where people blame the refs, but championship teams, get past that and make the moment anyway. If your mic had a glitch at some point, you find another opportunity to make the moment. Kamala seized her moment, so she deserves all the credit in the world for that.
Yeah. You can't take it away. I want to ask you, though, is it, because I'm curious about this, is it talent, is it preparation, or is it luck? Or is it all three? Because she rose to the occasion, and I'm curious why.
Well, yeah, I think there's I think it's like 95% prep and 5% luck. She had the luck that no one else sees their own moment. She had the luck that I think from what we read, Biden was prepping for attacks. It's not like he didn't know these things were going to come. I think he had no idea that Kamala Harris, someone who had a good working relationship / friendship with his son when they were both attorney general, someone who he has posed for photos with, someone who was, in everyone's estimation, the most likely running mate with him, that she was going to be the one and use her personal story of busing to prosecute the case. I do not think he prepared for that, just based by his response. And So that I don't know. Did you watch Veep?
Yeah, I loved it.
Did you watch the finale of Veep?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't say this in a mean way. I don't mean to suggest anything negative about Kamala, because again, I think she deserves the credit here. The scene where the chief of staff Ben is in the hospital bed, essentially telling Selena Meyer, like, stop wallowing in your self-pity. You go out and take this thing. And she goes out and manipulates her rival's mistress into accusing him for sexual harassment, and then throws her daughter under the bus and flips on gay marriage. She basically made the decision, I will go as low as I have to. Yeah. There's nothing that's going to stop me from taking this nomination in this election. And obviously Kamala here is not going low. She's not doing anything unethical or untoward, but she made a decision. Nothing is going to stand in my way. I have a friendship with Joe Biden, and he is in my way, and it does not matter. I am running for number one, and that's how winners win.
And I think that's perfectly honorable. If you're in a sporting event, and you're personal friends with the quarterback, but you're also being paid to sack him, you do that. Right. It's on the field, right? This is an on the field thing. I don't think there's any. Now, look, I think there are scummy things that people do, like the way that Kirsten Gillibrand turned on the Clintons, for example, may be more of a sign of disloyalty because she chose to get in that game. You know what I mean? She wasn't already on the field. But and Kamala, I think, I admire what she did, because I think it would have been easy for her to play it safe. Let's try to be Joe's running mate. I actually think by gunning for number one, what's it? You shoot for the stars, and you may. What's the saying, Bill? You're into this crunchy.
I don't know, but I get what you're saying.
Going for number one, she has a better chance of being the running mate.
Now, so the flip side question is, can Biden recover? And I don't know. I don't know. I do think he is not one to curl up in a ball and slink away. As much as his defensiveness did not help him last night, I do think he is correct that contrition is not the way to go either. He needs to be able to one of the things I think has been tough for him is, obviously he'd been better off never to have brought up segregationists and busing at all. If he's never had that comment at the fundraiser 2 weeks ago, none of this happens. So that's on him. But the reason why I think he did do it, and there is a degree of logic here, it is part of his record. Someone could bring it up at some point, so you might as well define it on your own terms. And he has been doing that for a long time. It's in his 2007 memoir, in preparation for his 2008 presidential run, to go into detail about why he developed working relationships with the old line segregationist, and why he took the stance on busing that he did. And it's much more complicated than he said himself. And I think because he was not prepared for the attack, he made it sound like he was a sort of straight states' rights guy. Locally do what you want, federal government stay out of it. And that's not quite the whole story. And I'm not even arguing that this is.
He's got the same problem. He's got the problem that conservatives so often have in debates, which is that it's very difficult to tell a complex story in a soundbite on a debate stage, and to do political philosophy, and to talk about unintended consequences and nuance. I know that's not the stereotype of conservatives, but I'm telling you, a lot of things that conservatives believe do not sound very defensible in soundbites. They sound stupid.
Right.
But if you give me a little time to explain it, maybe you would agree.
And I think
But the thing is, too, look, part of Biden's selling point is let Biden be Biden. He's authentic, he's Uncle Joe, and he's going to say some crazy stuff, but that's kind of fun. Well, there's a downside. It's a double-edged sword, right? And that happened. And I think the problem is Joe Biden is fundamentally out of touch with this party. This party has gone radically left, Bill.
I would disagree with you on this point, but go on.
Right, Bill puts an asterisk there, but I'm telling you, you go down the list of the last two nights, the last two debates, all the things, basically no, like abortion on demand, no checks at all on it. Anybody can come into America, cross the border, can't be deported, shouldn't be a crime. I mean, they are staking out some pretty radical territory on all sorts of issues. What it could be, having to do with health insurance and Medicare for all that stuff. They're staking out some very progressive territory, and Joe Biden is not. He is out of touch with this moment fundamentally, and I just think they're going to just pick him apart. He's going to be playing defense all the time. So he has two choices. The Sister Souljah moment, where he's like, damn it, this is who I am. This is the way we're going to beat Donald Trump. And if you don't like it, too bad. Or he has to flip, in which case he risks looking both inauthentic and sacrificing his number one selling point, which is actually, being authentic and being electable. So he's in this he's being squeezed.
I think that on abortion and immigration, there is a noticeable shift in the party over the last 10, 15 years. Tonally on abortion, there's a lot less emphasis on the caveats.
There are none.
I don't think that's quite right. The general viewpoint of most Democrats is abortion legal up until viability, and after viability to protect the life and health of the mother.
It's basically, there is a sense that abortion rights are civil rights, and that if a state wants to put any sort of limitations on abortion, that they should be treated the way that a segregationist state would be treated by the federal government. I mean, that's kind of Kamala Harris's.
Well, yeah, they don't have a states' rights view on abortion. That is true. That's why they want Roe v. Wade. They want Roe v. Wade to be robust and not chipped away. They want access to be available in all states. They don't want states to be able to nickel and dime abortion clinics out of their state. That is true. But that's not all that different from where the position has always been. But I think in the 90s, it was this safe, legal, rare formulation that Bill Clinton coined to put the emphasis on the rare to make it seem like we're not saying abortion on demand, and the delicacy of the rhetoric is not there the way it was before. For whether you agree with it or not, I think there is that shift.
Well, that's a big. If you're trying to win Michigan and Pennsylvania, like the Democrats ostensibly will need to. How about Florida? There are a lot of guns in Florida. Good or bad, whether you like that or not. If the Democrats want to actually beat Donald Trump, they are staking out really radical territory on all sorts of, basically every issue. I'm telling you.
Well, it's not every issue. I agree with you. What I said about abortion.
And Joe Biden's out of touch with that.
I also don't really agree with that. I agree that on guns, Obama was sort of voce on guns from 2008 to 2012, and, post Sandy Hook, post Parkland, Democrats in general not so voce on guns. We'll see if that matters in the general or not. And on immigration, Democrats definitely walked a much finer line before 2012, and now, and this is where I look. It's clear that the Trump campaign is loving Democrats saying undocumented immigrants can get government health care. They love saying that. I mean, that's one issue where I'm not going to say right now I know how it's going to fly in a general. Clearly, they have some data to suggest that's a soft spot for Democrats. Having said that, I think this could be like a gay marriage issue where Democrats are simply reaching the logical conclusion of their point and may conclude that it is sellable when they get there. If you're going to say that undocumented immigrant is a person who is a human who wants to be an American and should not be treated like a criminal or second-class citizen, well, that has to apply across the board. If you're going to say these people are here to deserve pathway to citizenship, how does that make that person any worse than someone who gets sick and needs a doctor?
Right. So I would say two things. One, even if you're right that they're basically that they're being coherent with their philosophy and that they're going to expand the Overton window and that eventually the country will get there, that may be true, but it's going to be 10 years. It sure as hell ain't going to be 2020. Well, it will hurt them. It will hurt them. And here's the other thing, though. That part I'm actually more open to. Look, I think Republicans will be able to use it against Democrats, but I understand the logic of that. If someone is already here, if they're undocumented but they've been here for a long time, and you want to give everybody else health care, I understand the logic. Why would you deprive this person of it, right? But to me, that wasn't even the most egregious thing. The most egregious thing, I think, started with Castro and continued last night, which is the notion that basically if someone comes into this country illegally, you should not try to deport them immediately, that you should just sort of welcome them with open arms. I just don't think this is going to fly with the vast majority of Americans out there. It seems very radical.
And I don't think, he arguably won that exchange with Beto on that point, because Beto was making more of a wonky point. But this is the kind of question where, I think, in a general, Castro will be leading with his chin on that point. The better way to approach it is our immigration system is broken and we need to fix it so people who are coming here for legitimate reasons are accepted properly.
Yeah. What this does, though, is create a magnet. This would make – look, here's the thing. David Brooks, people are making fun of David Brooks. It's fun to make fun of David Brooks. I think we could agree with that. But he has a column out today where he says, the Democrats are turning me off. Well, look, maybe, I don't know. If you need David Brooks, maybe you're in trouble anyway, right? But there is a point there. I mean, I'm somebody who has been in favor of immigration reform. I want amnesty. I want a pathway to citizenship. I was for the 2014, immigration bill. And yet I'm seeing what the Democrats, the mainstream Democratic position, not only does my political analyst hat say it's stupid and it's going to hurt them, but just my own personal viewpoint sees it as very radical and dangerous and bad for the country. They are going really far out there. And I know I started off by saying that Biden's out of touch, but I do think that, I will say this, Bill. I think Donald Trump has a very good chance at this point of being reelected, and I think the odds went up just in the past 48 hours.
Well, the issues that you're talking about, abortion, guns, immigration, these are the hot button culture war type issues, and Trump definitely used those issues to his benefit to win in 2016. They didn't win the views of the majority of the country, but they helped him juice the base in the states that mattered. So is it possible that a replay of those issues would help Trump? That's possible. I can't know that today. It's also possible that seeing Trump implement his vision on these issues, particularly when it comes to immigration, have been so horrifying that a replay doesn't work out in his favor. So you're seeing Democrats, to get back to immigration, what's fundamental here is, do you think immigration and immigrants in this country are good or bad? Is it a positive or a negative? And Democrats are saying it's a positive, not that it's a neutral, not that let's have an.
No, but they're saying it's an unmitigated positive. What I say is, people who have already come here, let's find a way to close the border, but to integrate them into society. We should have immigrants coming here legally. We should also control our border, which a sovereign country has a right and I think a responsibility to do. But we shouldn't just have an open border where people come here and defy our laws as their first action of becoming an American. We shouldn't be incentivizing and encouraging that. Yes, people who are here already, let's find a way to give them a pathway that they can earn their citizenship. But the Democrats are radicalizing me. They want to put me on Donald Trump's.
But I think you are oversimplifying what they're saying, which is leading to your radicalization. But I do believe that
I'm watching the debates.
Well, I mean, even Castro says he's not for open borders. But I think he is saying, I think what Democrats in general are saying is, we think immigration is a positive, and so we don't want to treat these people like they are criminals. We want a system that encourages the people who are coming here to work and contribute to society to come. Once you make the conclusion that undocumented immigrants are good people who contribute to America, there are logical positions that flow from that. And this is where Biden, for example, you're saying everyone's, where Biden got a little bit tripped up. I mean, this wasn't the main thing. The Obama formulation was, if you're here, but you have committed serious crimes, that is going to be the priority for our deportation efforts, which Biden was defending. And I don't think most Democrats would necessarily disagree with that. I mean, there are people who say that Obama's execution of that wasn't as surgical as he's making it out to be. But it's not like
Kamala and other people were attacking Obama last night for deporting illegal immigrants.
Because I think they were blurring that point about prioritizing criminals.
They were attacking, but they were literally Democrats on the stage were attacking Barack Obama for deporting illegal immigrants.
Because they're going to argue that the way Obama did it wasn't as perfectly executed as he said, that families were broken up, that people were deported for ticky-tack things. And I don't know how they're going to formulate it in a general election if they would clean up some of that rhetoric for a different audience. But I don't think you're going to see whenever a Democrat wins a general, they're not going to say, "Oh, you committed a robbery as an undocumented immigrant, you get to stay." I don't think anyone's going to say that.
Right. But I want to so again, there's really two things here. Is what Democrats are saying and doing smart politics, is it going to bite them in the ass? I think that will happen. I think that they're in danger politically. But then there's a question are they actually right morally in terms of public policy? And I just want to interrogate this idea that immigration is an unmitigated good, which I think is what they all believe, and I think is how you essentially have described their position. I'm very pro-immigration, and I think by and large immigrants have really helped our country and all that. But can we agree that it's is a billion immigrants too much? Would 2 billion? What if 50% of America were foreign born and not assimilated? Could we agree that there's some point at which there becomes a point of diminishing returns where we cannot assimilate immigrants? I think, of course there is. Of course there is some point, even if I want more immigrants, there is some point at which it would become a negative, at least for a while. But I don't think there's any belief or understanding that that's the case among the Democrats.
I mean, I wouldn't make that point myself. I don't know if there is some magical number where it tips over and it becomes bad.
You think you don't believe that there's any point at which there would be too many immigrants for America to assimilate and to have employment of American citizens or whatever? You don't think there's any point at which that becomes a negative?
I think that over the course of all of human history, immigration has there is an element of human nature that gets very defensive when people who are from other cultures enter in their space.
Sure.
And I do not believe I want to cater to that attitude. I want to find a way to overcome it.
But my point, though, is nothing to do with that. But let's stick with your point. If there are a lot of Americans out there who, right or wrong, feel like they're losing their country, feel like they're losing their jobs, feel like America is passing them by, even if you and I don't have that problem, and shouldn't we be sensitive to the plight of those struggling Americans?
Well, the key word there is feel. Is that really happening or not?
It doesn't matter. I don't. Well, if people feel like America is in trouble, then it is.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't agree with that. Look, I understand the policies of immigration are extraordinarily difficult, for all the reasons that you were saying. And, you know, I'm a pragmatist and not an idealist, and, you know, I'm not going to suggest that a party take a position that is going to be a sure electoral loser, because I don't think that makes sense. And I accept that there are certainly immigration positions that could cross that line to become political liabilities. But as far as what I think makes intellectual coherent sense, if you're having a situation where, you know, a large group of immigrants came in and a lot of people who had jobs lost jobs, that would be bad. You know, I would not want to see that kind of economic disruption. I do not believe that would actually occur. I know there's some conflicting studies on this point, but my general opinion is that more people is good for economic growth. It creates economic opportunity. I mean, people don't just come and take; they give too. You know,
look, I generally agree with you. I'm just saying, like, you know, a little, like, the poison is in the dose, right? I mean, like, water is generally good, but too much water and you drown. Like, we can take a certain amount, and that might only, and maybe some of it is because some, not you or me, but other people feel like the country is changing too rapidly. But that's the thing. But let me just back up and make my fundamental point, which is, you know me, you know how I feel about Trump, you know how I feel about immigration.
Yeah.
Democrats have me ready to say, like, build the wall. If that's happening,
that's on you, though.
if that's happening to me, isn't that a problem for Democrats?
I mean, look, if I saw polling that showed that the immigration rhetoric they were making was making their margin over Trump diminished or completely lost, then yes, I would say it's a political problem. I don't know it's going to be the case. It could. I agree completely. The immigration is like an extraordinarily sensitive issue that has burned many a politician in the past.
But it's not just immigration. It's so many issues. It's 5 to 7 issues over the last 2 nights.
Well, circling back to a point I was trying to make before, I think you are pointing out where Democrats are moving on these cultural type issues. I do not believe the last 2 debates showed that Democrats have no guardrails on the economic issues. You were seeing pushback to Bernie on single payer. You saw Democrats hesitant to embrace 70% top end tax bracket marginal tax rate. So I think there's much more understanding that there are places that the party should not go, and we're not rushing to go. And the crowds were not shaming them for doing that. I mean, I think Beto, was too timid in drawing that line, but he knew that's not a place he wanted to go. So I think it's a more complicated story than these debates show. Democrats are just going all left all the time.
No, I agree with that.
You're seeing the ideological division in the party too.
No, I agree with that. And as a capitalist, I'm happy that socialism isn't winning the day. But I would argue that culture is more resonant than economics.
Well, I think that was the story of 2016, and I don't think we know precisely how after 4 years of Trump those issues play.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. Who knows? But I would say this. Donald Trump is so bad and so radical that he abandoned the middle of the field in so many ways. And Democrats, rather than seizing that, have chosen to be their own Donald Trump and their own, the backlash. Trump has pushed them, instead of allowing them to occupy this now abandoned sort of, civil centrist area. Trump has radicalized them and pushed them leftward in response.
It is much harder to be a moderate on cultural issues when Trump is actively polarizing things even more to where they were, 4 years prior. Yes. It's hard to walk that line. I think Trump economically is not as polarizing. He is more. I mean, there's plenty of stuff that he's done that Democrats don't like, but it's sort of in the conventional space. He's deregulating. Democrats want to regulate more. He's cutting taxes on the wealthy. Democrats want to raise taxes on the wealthy. That's more common stuff. And then there's trade, where he's not an orthodox Republican, and Democrats are kind of all over the map on that question. I want to circle back though to Biden. And why I think he is where he is, because again, he didn't need to dig into his own past and elevate these subjects, except for perhaps an anticipation that someone else was going to do it anyway, so he had to get ahead of it. And I think he was trying to get ahead of it way back in 2007 when he wrote about this stuff in his memoir, and he wrote about it in a more detailed and nuanced way than he could achieve in a 90-second space. And what I think, even hear leaks from his own staff saying, why keep bringing up the segregationists? Why you don't have to, you can talk about bipartisanship and civility without bringing up these examples. When you read his book, it's very clear that he sees these experiences largely come from his first term, when he lost his wife and daughter in a car accident, and the Senate treated him like a member of their family, and got him on his feet, and were guiding him through the world of politics. I mean, he was elected in his late 20s. And so there's a story about Jesse Helms that he tells, that he had a standard Democratic view of Helms, that he was this horribly racist person, which, quite frankly, he was. And the Democratic Senate leader said, he adopted this kid who had cerebral palsy, don't assume that his heart is bad. You can disagree with his judgment, but not his motive. But his favorite Biden lines, agree with the man's judgment, but not his motive. That's where that comes from. So I think in Biden's mind, this is his origin story. This is how he became the politician he is today, by saying these people who seem horrible on the surface and may well hold horrible positions still had some good in them somewhere, and he had to find a way to work with them. And so he doesn't want to walk away from a key element of his biography. Now, that is a hard thing to explain in a modern context, and certainly in the cattle call 10-candidate limited time debate format.
Yeah. But even if he tried to say what you said, which was pretty eloquent, more eloquent than him, people are also interrupting. Somebody could stop him. And this happens to me all the time on cable TV, on a panel type situation. Not only is it hard to tell a complex, nuanced story in a short amount of time, but you don't even necessarily have the microphone. He could have been, at some point, someone could interrupt that at an inopportune time and mock him or something. So it's a very difficult thing to do, what he's trying to do.
Well, and then layered on top of that is the busing question, where Biden, you could say it was on the side of angels.
Yeah.
I think you could, in the Biden telling, which is, it's in the book. It's not like he doesn't run away from it. He lays it all out. And in the debate, he says to Kamala, you would have still been able to have been bused because it would have been a city council decision. It just should have been mandated by Department of Education. And that was horrifying to a lot of people. You sound like a states' rights segregationist when you say that stuff. And his actual position, again, not necessarily wonderful. I'm not saying this makes him right on the subject, but his position at the time was that if the segregation was de jure intentional, if the locality was intentionally trying to segregate, then it was okay for the federal government to force desegregation via busing. But if it was de facto by passive housing patterns, then it was not okay for the federal government to Bigfoot it and force the issue. That was his position. And you could say today, and some people said at the time, that that's not a great position because there's so much institutional racism that you have to unwind, that only going after the overt problems is sufficient. But as he lays out in the book, he was getting hammered on both sides for that point. He wasn't occupying a happy center. He was getting savaged on both sides. He went into a white audience who wanted him to oppose all busing, and he said very pointedly, he laid out that distinction and said, in the case of intentional segregation, I would pay for the helicopters to send the children to the other school. And he said he felt physically threatened by the white audience, and the other politicians were like literally moving away from him when he said that. So my point of all this is he has a story to tell. It's a very complicated story. Yeah. There's elements of the story that still don't make him look great, but I think the thread of it is that from a very early age, he was in the middle of these things. He took the hits from all sides on these things, trying to find a solution. I think this is the key point that didn't come through last night. He wasn't trying to keep segregation. He was trying to find a solution to these problems that didn't cause that kind of backlash that you're talking about with immigration. And it wasn't easy. It didn't always work. He took a lot of bruises for it. And he could say today, if I could make this a little more, even more complicated, I worked in the Obama-Biden administration where we proposed a bold desegregation policy through HUD that involved interactive computer mapping. With better technology, we could more readily solve these institutional systemic racism problems, tools we did not have in the 70s, where we were stuck with these more cruel tools that cause a lot of disruption and heartache.
Yeah. The problem is it's easy for Kamala to be like, I was that little girl.
Yeah.
Everybody applauds.
Right.
Biden has to tell this elaborate story.
Yeah.
And even then, it's sort of like, okay, maybe he has a point. Fundamentally, the problem is Biden has the disadvantage of having been in a position of being in the Senate during this very different time. I mean, even the crime bill, you don't have to go back to the busing. You just go back to the 90s. Crime was rampant. New York City was like ungovernable. Biden supports this crime bill that Bill Clinton wants. And now he's a pariah for doing it. It's just he has this unfortunate baggage of actually having been in charge of getting stuff done for many, many years.
Well, and I think the thread there, I mean, I laid this out in a piece called The Two Biden Problem, back in April or May. This is where I think Biden was sort of on the right path in talking about this stuff insofar as he needs to explain his story so he's not as vulnerable. But I don't think he did it in such a piecemeal way that it didn't get tied all together. If you can tell your story in full before the debate,
yes,
you're more inoculated yourself. And I think the thread is for Biden that from a very early age, he was in the middle of all these very complicated, polarizing issues, trying to find a way forward.
Do you think Biden does he need to, today or tomorrow, have a video, a speech, something that gets attention where he can tell this story?
I don't think it would be a bad idea. I mean, I don't know what he needs. Again, the polling might come out next week and nothing changes, so I don't know what he needs. But it would be interesting if he pulled an Obama, if he treated this like the Jeremiah Wright situation and did his own version of the More Perfect Union speech and said, here is my life story. This is how I've approached race my whole life. And I know I didn't get it right every single time, and I know people can still criticize it, but this is where my heart was. This is what I was trying to achieve. I was trying to solve these problems in a way that would unify whites and non-whites. And I didn't think that every wish list item on the left was going to do that. I was seeing it cause more polarization, and I wanted to find a better way. And it was halting, and it was complicated, and maybe it didn't get right every time. But it ends with me partnering with Barack Obama to do bold desegregation that Trump is trying to unwind. And I know how to fix this problem, and I can fix it.
Joe Biden should hire Bill Scher. I think we can agree on that. Honestly, and I think if they'd been listening to us and reading our stuff, they might have been better off. The problem, of course, is that's an admission. That's a tacit admission that you have a problem, right? If you take it seriously enough to have a Jeremiah Wright speech, that's a tacit admission that you're in trouble. And do they want to concede that at this point?
I mean, they may want to wait till they see the next round of poll numbers and see if it actually is a problem. But I think Barack Obama knew this is a problem.
Yeah.
And
my gut is this is a problem, and you want to stem the bleeding, and they should do it ASAP.
And the Obama decision, a very gutsy decision, was to not only turn into the problem, but make it, but broaden the lens, make it to an even bigger issue than it already is, to show what's in my heart and what I can do on the national stage.
Yeah.
And this may be the time that Biden has to do something like that if he wants to get past this.
I think it's the move. Biden, if you're listening, you need to give. I say, like, this isn't going away. Stem the bleeding, and get don't try to hide from this. Don't think this is going to go away or pass. Tell your story. You can't tell it in a debate format, and you can't tell it during an interview either. I don't think he has the ability to do that. So, and how do you get eyeballs? He has to find a way, to get cameras there and then tell this story.
Well, the cameras will be there.
If he says, I'm going to give an address about race, about what happened in the debate, we'll run over each other trying to get there. Hey, Bill, we got a lot to talk about, but we've talked a long time, and the sooner we stop, the sooner the suits and blogging heads can get this video up, and the more likely it will be relevant to the debate. Is my thinking. What do you think?
Well, sure. One quick thing though. So I did have on Sunday a piece in Politico. What would Bernie bomb? I think I
like the good title.
Thank you. I think I referenced this briefly at the last show. Forgive me if I never remember what we say offline or online. But this was a reported piece. I talked to Bernie's foreign policy advisor. I talked to several other foreign policy experts. I think if you haven't read it, I think there's stuff in there that you probably don't know. And the big thing, and I'm a little disappointed it didn't come up last night, because it came up a little bit the night before, this tension between, do we use our military to stop humanitarian emergencies like genocide, or do we have, or is fealty to the War Powers Resolution, which says Congress has the final say on military hostilities, does that override? And Bernie Sanders is known for being a big advocate of the War Powers Resolution and interpreting it strictly. In fact, he did so this year with Yemen. He got Congress to pass a resolution saying, under the War Powers Resolution, Donald Trump, you don't have the authority to military intervene in Yemen. You have to withdraw in every respect, troops, money, etc. Trump vetoes the bill, so it's not the law, but he got a bipartisan vote for that bill. And what the wrinkle in all this is that in Kosovo 20 years ago, when Congress did not pass any kind of War Powers Resolution authorization of that bombing, Bernie references that fact, but still supports the bombing because he thought it was more imperative to stop genocide. And when I asked this question to his foreign policy advisor, if he's in a situation where he thinks we should act, but Congress isn't with him, the people aren't with him, does he follow the War Powers Resolution? And the response was not necessarily. And he said, he would work with Congress, he'd consult the experts, he'd engage the people, but at the end of the day, he would do what he feels is right. That's what his foreign policy advisor told me on the record. And I thought that could use some more fleshing out in a debate setting, because it came up the night before, but we didn't get to hear about it. Bernie's thoughts on it last night, but I do think there's a real question still. You will learn more about it from my piece, but there's a gray area, in my opinion, when exactly Bernie would use military force, and it's a fact that he has opened the door to it. I mean, he said that on the record. He's not a pacifist. He's voted for a military operation in the past in certain circumstances. But if you want to know, is Bernie going to be a transformative commander-in-chief in terms of turning away from war? That's what the rhetoric says. I think there's elements of the record that complicate that point.
And if Bernie catches fire, this is going to come back.
If he does, although I don't. I mean, as tough as this debate was for Joe Biden's prospects, I did not think Bernie helped himself either. Warren was on the rise. She was already coming into essentially a rough tie with Bernie in second place, and now it's very possible that Kamala comes up, and how much she takes a chunk out of Biden, how much she takes a chunk out of Warren or Bernie, or does she relegate the third-tier folks farther down to the side? How much is this now a four-way race between the four of them? Like, the specifics that I think are very, very unclear without more data.
Yeah. Well, great show. And we're going to have a lot more debates to talk about, so.
Till next month. And then you got, I had another piece this week in Real Clear Politics where I was criticizing the DNC for their thresholds for invite criteria, which is all polling in small donor numbers. And I think the small donor element is an incentive for fringe candidates to hang around. Yang, my concern last night was that a Williamson or Yang would gum up the works and not let other people get their day in the sun. That did not prove true. Neither one of them were strong enough to accomplish that. But Yang said that he's near the 130,000 donor threshold. He's likely going to be, not just in the July debate, but at the September debate when the thresholds go up. There are people who should be on that stage like Steve Bullock in Montana, and he's made his own mistakes by jumping in late. But there's no reason why. There's only 3 governors in the race. Governors are usually your prime pool of candidates. Why is Bullock not on the stage and Yang on? Because they have terrible criteria.
I think Yang has a compelling. I'm glad that he brought up the issue of automation. Got a hearing last night.
Oh yeah, we're really talking about universal basic income now. Thank you, Andrew Yang. We've solved that problem.
Mentioned. And I think Yang has just as much argument as one of these governors in the modern era. But that's for another day.
Well, tell me how you feel in September or November where he's still hanging around. Everyone's like, dude, we got a real race going on here. Why are you still here?
He's still hanging around. It's because he earned his way in.
Because he has a pool of donors that are a minuscule slice of America who are propping up a fringe candidate and exploiting stupid rules.
Tell me how you really feel, Bill. I'm starting to think you're not in the Yang gang.
I'm in the Williamson, I guess.
Well, but love will find a way. So love will keep us alive.
All right. Till next week, sir.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks, Bill.